It was one of those dreary Seattle Saturdays, the kind where the rain never stops, just shifts from a heavy downpour to a persistent drizzle that soaks you to the bone. Our little house in the suburbs, a two-story craftsman with peeling green paint and a sagging front porch, felt like a cocoon against the gray. The kids were at their grandparents' for the weekend, leaving me and Mark to rattle around in the quiet. I'd decided to tackle the Christmas decorations early, hoping to shake off the gloom with a bit of holiday cheer, even if it was only October. The basement was my destination, a damp, cluttered space we rarely used except for storage. I trudged down the creaky wooden stairs, my sneakers scuffing against the worn treads, the air growing cooler and heavier with that familiar musty smell. The basement was a mess, as always, boxes of old toys, Mark's camping gear from his outdoors phase, and stacks of holiday bins shoved against the concrete walls. The single bare bulb overhead cast harsh shadows, making the space feel smaller, more oppressive. I was rummaging through a pile of tangled Christmas lights when something caught my eye, a faint outline in the far wall, behind a stack of dusty sleeping bags and a rusted Coleman stove. It was subtle, just a hairline crack in the concrete, but it didn't look right. The wall was supposed to be solid, part of the foundation. I frowned, stepping closer, my breath hitching as I realized it wasn't just a crack. It was a seam, precise and deliberate, like the edge of a door that didn't belong. My husband, Mark, had been spending a lot of time down here lately. He'd always been handy, the kind of guy who could fix a leaky faucet or build a bookshelf without breaking a sweat. For weeks, he'd been disappearing into the basement after dinner, claiming he was organizing or sorting through junk. I'd teased him about it once, asking if he was building a man cave. He'd laughed, his hazel eyes crinkling, and said, "Nah, Jen, just trying to make space for your holiday obsession." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? 15 years of marriage, 2 kids, and a life built on trust, or so I thought. But now, staring at that outline, my stomach twisted. This wasn't organization. This was something else. I set the Christmas lights down, my hands suddenly clammy. The air felt heavier, the musty smell sharper. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I traced the outline in the concrete. It was cold, smooth, and unnervingly perfect, not a crack from settling, but a cut, like someone had carved it with purpose. My heart started to race, a steady thump-thump that echoed in my ears. I pressed against the wall, half expecting nothing, but there was a soft click, barely audible over the hum of the furnace. The section of concrete shifted inward, revealing a narrow door, its edges flush with the wall, painted to blend in. My breath caught. A hidden door. In our basement. In our house. I stood frozen, staring into the dark gap where the door had opened. The chemical smell hit me first, not the usual basement dampness, but something acrid, sharp, like cleaning fluid or something worse. My mind raced, grasping for explanations. Maybe it was a utility closet we'd never noticed? A leftover from the previous owners? But we'd lived here for a decade, and I'd been in every corner of this basement. I'd have known. Mark would have known. Wouldn't he? I grabbed my phone from my pocket, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a small room, maybe 10 feet by 10, with bare concrete walls and a low ceiling. My pulse pounded as I stepped inside, the air cooler, the chemical smell stronger. There were 2 metal cabinets, locked with heavy padlocks, their surfaces gleaming like they were new. A folding table held a laptop, its screen dark, and a tangle of cables snaking to a power strip. A single fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow. There were no holiday decorations, no camping gear, no innocent clutter. This was deliberate, hidden, and wrong. My knees felt weak, but I forced myself to move closer. The laptop was closed, a thin layer of dust on its lid, like it hadn't been touched in a day or two. Next to it was a stack of papers, clipped together, but I didn't dare touch them. My eyes darted to the cabinets. What was inside? Tools? Documents? Something worse? The chemical smell stung my nose, making my head spin. I thought of crime shows, of secret labs and hidden stashes, and my stomach lurched. Mark? My Mark? The man who coached Little League and sang off-key to Springsteen in the car? No. It couldn't be. But the room was real, and so was the dread curling in my gut. I backed out, my flashlight beam shaking as I fumbled to close the door. It clicked shut, blending back into the wall like it had never existed. My heart was hammering so hard I could barely think. I stumbled upstairs, the Christmas decorations forgotten, and locked the basement door behind me. The house was quiet, the rain tapping against the windows, but it felt like a stranger's home now. Mark was at work, or so he'd said, but his organizing excuse rang hollow. What was he doing down there? Why hadn't he told me? And why did it feel like I'd just stumbled into something dangerous? I sank onto the couch, my phone still clutched in my hand. I wanted to call Mark, demand answers, but something stopped me. If he'd hidden this room, he'd hidden it for a reason. Confronting him now might tip him off, give him a chance to cover his tracks. I needed to be smart, to find out more before he knew I was onto him. I opened my photos, staring at the blurry shot I'd taken of the room. The cabinets, the laptop, that chemical smell, they weren't innocent. I didn't know what I'd found, but I knew it wasn't right. And deep down, I knew I couldn't stay silent. Whatever Mark was hiding, I'd uncover it. Even if it broke us. The discovery of that hidden room in our basement had flipped my world upside down, like someone had yanked the rug out from under my carefully built life. Mark, my husband of 15 years, the man who'd held my hand through labor with our twins, Emma and Ethan, and who still left sticky notes on the fridge with goofy hearts, was hiding something. That concrete door, the chemical smell, the locked cabinets, it wasn't just a quirk or a home improvement project gone weird. It was a secret, deliberate and heavy, and it made my skin crawl. The Seattle rain hadn't let up since that Saturday, and neither had the knot in my stomach. I couldn't unsee that room, couldn't shake the feeling that I'd married a stranger. Mark had always been a private guy, the kind who'd rather fix a problem himself than talk it out. He'd disappear into his woodworking hobby or tinker with the car for hours, and I'd loved that about him, his quiet competence, his steady hands. But the last few months had been different, like a switch had flipped. He'd started taking late-night phone calls, stepping out to the garage with a quick "it's work, Jen" before shutting the door. His laptop, once left open on the kitchen counter, now had a password he never shared. And then there was his sudden obsession with basement projects. He'd spend hours down there, coming up sweaty and distracted, brushing off my questions with a vague, "just cleaning up, babe." I'd believed him, or at least I'd wanted to. But now, after finding that hidden room, every memory felt like a lie. I started watching him closer, my eyes catching things I'd ignored before. The way he'd tense when I mentioned the basement, his shoulders stiffening like I'd touched a nerve. The way he'd check his phone when he thought I wasn't looking, his thumb swiping quickly before locking it again. Even his smile, that easy grin I'd fallen for in college, seemed forced now, like he was playing a part. I hated myself for doubting him, but the evidence was piling up, and it wasn't just in my head. That room was real. The chemical smell was real. And the fear creeping up my spine every time I thought about it was real. That night, after Mark went to bed, I couldn't sleep. The kids were still at their grandparents', and the house was too quiet, the rain tapping against the windows like a code I couldn't crack. I lay next to Mark, his steady breathing a stark contrast to the storm in my chest. I kept seeing that room, the laptop, the locked cabinets, that acrid smell that didn't belong in a suburban basement. I needed to go back, to see it again, to prove I hadn't imagined it. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet cold on the hardwood, and grabbed my phone and a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. The basement door creaked as I opened it, and I froze, listening for any sign Mark had stirred. Nothing. Just the hum of the fridge and the patter of rain. The stairs groaned under my weight, each step amplifying the thud of my heartbeat. The basement was darker than I remembered, the single bulb casting long shadows across the clutter. I moved quickly to the hidden door, my flashlight beam trembling as it traced the faint outline in the concrete. I pushed, half expecting it to be stuck, but it wouldn't budge. My heart sank as I noticed something new, a heavy padlock, shiny and industrial, securing the door. It hadn't been there 2 days ago. My hand shook as I touched it, the metal cold and unyielding. Mark had locked it. He knew someone might find it, maybe he knew I had found it. I stepped back, my mind racing. Why lock it now? What was he hiding that needed a padlock? I swept the flashlight around, searching for anything out of place. The camping gear was still piled up, the Christmas bins untouched, but something felt off. I moved closer to a rickety metal shelf in the corner, its shelves sagging under the weight of old paint cans and extension cords. My beam caught a glint behind it, a small, leather-bound notebook, wedged between the shelf and the wall, like it had been hastily hidden. My breath hitched as I reached for it, my fingers brushing cobwebs as I pulled it free. The notebook was worn, its edges frayed, but it looked new enough to be Mark's. I opened it, my hands trembling so badly the pages crinkled. Inside were rows of cryptic codes and numbers, written in his precise handwriting. Drop 10/12, 47.6062, -122.3321, 2300H, 5K. Contact, R, no trace. Batch 310 units, 98%. None of it made sense, but it screamed trouble, coordinates, times, amounts. My mind flashed to crime shows, drug deals, money laundering, worse. My hands shook as I snapped photos of every page with my phone, the flash casting eerie light across the basement. My mind was screaming that Mark was hiding something dangerous, something that could ruin us. I tucked the notebook back exactly where I'd found it, my heart pounding so loud I was sure it'd wake the neighborhood. I crept upstairs, locking the basement door behind me, and sank onto the couch, staring at the photos on my phone. The codes, the numbers, the padlock, they were pieces of a puzzle I didn't want to solve, but I couldn't stop now. I thought of Mark's late-night calls, the way he'd started carrying cash instead of using his card, the new lock on his laptop. Little things I'd brushed off as stress or midlife quirks now felt like neon signs pointing to a secret life. The next morning, I played the part of the oblivious wife. I made coffee, scrambled eggs, and smiled as Mark rambled about a new client at his construction firm. Big project downtown, he said, sipping his coffee. Might keep me late this week. I nodded, my stomach churning, but I kept my voice light. Sounds busy. Need anything for the basement? You've been down there a lot. His fork paused, just for a second, and his eyes flicked to mine before he laughed. Nah, just sorting junk. You know me, always tinkering. I smiled, but my skin prickled. He was lying, and I was done pretending I didn't see it. I spent the day digging deeper. While Mark was at work, I checked his laptop, but the password had changed, another wall between us. I went through his desk, his car, even the pockets of his work jacket, looking for anything, a key, a receipt, a clue. Nothing. But I wasn't giving up. I called my sister, Claire, who lived across town. You ever notice Mark acting weird? I asked, keeping it vague. She laughed, said he was always a bit off, but nothing specific. I didn't tell her about the room or the notebook. Not yet. I needed more before I let anyone else in. That evening, Mark came home late, his hair damp from the rain. Traffic was a nightmare, he said, tossing his keys on the counter. I nodded, watching him closely. His phone buzzed, and he grabbed it, stepping into the garage before I could say anything. I waited, my heart racing, and crept to the door, pressing my ear against it. His voice was low, urgent. Not now, he said. It's under control. Thursday, same time. My blood ran cold. Thursday. Another secret meeting? I thought of the notebook's codes, the coordinates, the locked room. Whatever Mark was doing, it wasn't innocent. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I needed to know more, to see inside that room again, to understand what those codes meant. I spent the next few days playing detective, my nerves frayed but my focus sharp. I checked the notebook again, finding new entries, more coordinates, more numbers. I googled the coordinates from the first page, my hands shaking as they pinpointed a warehouse district near the port. Not a place Mark had any reason to be. I thought of calling the police, but what would I say? My husband has a secret room? I needed hard evidence, something they couldn't dismiss. By Wednesday, I was a wreck, barely sleeping, barely eating. I kept up the act for Mark, laughing at his jokes, kissing him goodnight, but every touch felt like a betrayal. I waited until he was asleep, his snore steady, and crept back to the basement. The padlock gleamed in my flashlight beam, mocking me. I didn't have the key, but I had the photos, the notebook, and a growing certainty that Mark was in deep, maybe deeper than I could handle. I needed to know what was behind that door before I confronted him, before I let this truth tear us apart. But as I stood there, the chemical smell faint but unmistakable, I knew one thing: whatever Mark was hiding, it was dangerous, and I was running out of time to find out. Chapter 3: The Key to the Truth. The discovery of the hidden room and that cryptic notebook had turned my life into a waking nightmare. Every moment I spent in our Seattle home felt like a lie, the walls themselves whispering secrets I wasn't sure I wanted to uncover. Mark, my husband of 15 years, the man who'd built a treehouse for our twins, Emma and Ethan, and who still kissed me goodnight with a sleepy smile, was hiding something dark. The padlock on that concrete door, the codes in his notebook, the late-night calls he took in the garage, it all pointed to a truth I couldn't ignore. I'd become a stranger in my own house, tiptoeing around the man I loved, my heart torn between fear and betrayal. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to stop until I had them. For days, I hunted for the key to that padlock. It consumed me, turning every quiet moment into a search. While Mark was at work, I tore through his desk in the home office, rifling through drawers of pens, receipts, and old business cards. Nothing. I checked his car, a beat-up Ford pickup he used for his construction job, digging under the seats, in the glove box, even peeling back the floor mats. Just lint and a crumpled gas station receipt. I went through his coat pockets, the ones hanging in the mudroom, half expecting another note like the one I'd found in the basement. My hands shook with every empty pocket, my mind racing with possibilities. Was the key on him? Did he carry it to keep it safe? Or was it hidden somewhere I hadn't thought to look? I started watching Mark even more closely, my eyes catching every detail. The way he'd linger in the garage after his work calls, the new habit of locking his phone immediately after checking it, the faint smell of that chemical odor clinging to his clothes when he came up from the basement. I'd ask casual questions over dinner: "How's the basement coming along?" And he'd shrug, his smile too quick, his eyes avoiding mine. "Just clearing out junk, Jen," he'd say, but his voice had an edge now, like he was testing me. I smiled back, my heart pounding, playing the part of the oblivious wife while my mind screamed that he was lying. By Wednesday, I was a mess, my nerves frayed from lack of sleep and the weight of suspicion. The kids were still at their grandparents', giving me too much time to obsess. I called my sister, Claire, again, fishing for reassurance. "Mark ever mention anything weird about work?" I asked, keeping my voice light. She laughed, said he was always a bit intense, but nothing stood out. I didn't tell her about the room or the notebook. I couldn't, not yet. The truth felt too big, too dangerous, to share without proof. I hung up, my stomach churning, and went back to searching. Thursday morning, I hit a breakthrough. Mark was in the shower, his work bag slung over a chair in the kitchen. I unzipped it, my hands trembling, and found his toolbox, a small metal case he used for odd jobs around the house. I opened it, expecting screwdrivers and nails, but something felt off. I ran my fingers along the underside of the lid, and there it was, a small key, taped to the metal with duct tape, its edges worn but shiny. My heart leapt into my throat. It was the right size for the padlock, I was sure of it. I peeled it free, my breath shallow, and slipped it into my pocket before zipping the bag back up. I stood there, listening to the shower run, my pulse racing like I'd just stolen something priceless. That night, Mark announced he had a work meeting downtown. Might be late, he said, grabbing his keys. I nodded, stirring a pot of soup I had no appetite for. Be safe, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. The second his truck pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my phone, a flashlight, and the key. The basement stairs creaked under my weight, the air growing colder, heavier, with every step. The hidden door loomed in the shadows, the padlock gleaming under my flashlight beam. My hand shook as I fitted the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click, and the door swung open, the chemical smell hitting me like a wave. I stepped inside, my flashlight cutting through the dimness. The room was just as I remembered, bare concrete walls, a low ceiling, that acrid smell stinging my nose. But now I could see more. The metal cabinets were still locked, but on the folding table, the laptop was open, its screen glowing faintly. Next to it were stacks of cash, bundled with rubber bands, more money than I'd ever seen in one place. 3 burner phones sat in a neat row, their screens dark. And on a shelf above the table, a row of glass vials filled with a clear liquid, their labels blank but ominous. My stomach churned. This wasn't a hobby. This wasn't organizing. This was something illegal, something dangerous. I moved to the laptop, my breath shallow. The screen showed a spreadsheet, rows and columns of names, dates, and numbers. I scrolled, my fingers trembling on the trackpad, and froze when I saw my name, Jennifer Marie Thompson, listed next to a date from last month and a dollar amount, $50,000. My heart stopped. What did it mean? Was I a target? A debt? A payoff? I scanned the other names, none I recognized, but the dates stretched back months, some with amounts in the millions. My mind raced to dark places, drugs, trafficking, blackmail. I didn't know what Mark was involved in, but it was bigger than I could have imagined. I pulled out my phone and started recording, sweeping the camera across the room, the cash, the phones, the vials, the laptop screen. My hand shook so badly the video was blurry, but I kept going, capturing every detail. The chemical smell made my head spin, and I wondered if I was breathing something toxic. I backed away from the vials, my heart pounding, and checked the cabinets. Still locked, no keys in sight. I wanted to break them open, to see what else Mark was hiding, but I didn't have time. He could be back any minute. I locked the door behind me, my fingers fumbling with the padlock. I hid the key in my jewelry box upstairs, tucked inside a velvet pouch with my grandmother's earrings. My mind was a storm of fear and questions. What was Mark doing? Was he selling drugs? Laundering money? And why was my name on that spreadsheet? I transferred the video to my laptop, locking it in a password-protected folder with the notebook photos. I couldn't trust Mark anymore, not the man who'd promised to love me forever, not the father of my children. Whatever he was involved in, it was dangerous, and I was in too deep to back out now. The next few days were torture. I kept up the act, making Mark's coffee, kissing him goodbye, but every touch felt like a lie. He came home late from his meeting, his clothes carrying that faint chemical smell. I asked about his night, casual as ever, but my eyes searched his face for cracks. He smiled, said it was just boring work stuff, but his hands fidgeted, his laugh too loud. I nodded, my heart racing, and waited for him to go to bed so I could check the notebook again. A new entry, drop 10/20, 47.6098, minus 122.3301, 0100H, 10K. Another set of coordinates, another time. I googled them, a dock near the port. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a one-time thing. It was a pattern, and I was running out of time to figure it out. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? I had a video, photos, a notebook, but no context. Would they believe me? Or would Mark talk his way out of it, like he always did? I needed more, proof that couldn't be explained away. I started tracking his phone, using an app I'd found online, but it was locked down, no location data shared. I checked his car again, finding a receipt for a hardware store, bolts, a new lock, nothing incriminating. But the key, the room, the spreadsheet, they were enough to keep me going. I wasn't just fighting for answers now. I was fighting for my life, for my kids, for the truth. And whatever Mark was hiding, I'd find it, even if it destroyed us. The weight of the secret room, the notebook, and that chilling spreadsheet with my name on it had turned our Seattle home into a battlefield. For days, I'd played the part of the devoted wife, smiling through breakfasts, nodding at Mark's stories about work, while my heart pounded with the truth I'd uncovered. The hidden door in the basement, the stacks of cash, the burner phones, the vials of unknown liquid, and my name, Jennifer Marie Thompson, $50,000, on a laptop screen haunted me. I couldn't keep pretending, couldn't keep swallowing the lies while Mark acted like everything was normal. I needed to confront him, to lay it all bare, and I needed to do it now. I chose Thursday night, a week after I'd unlocked the secret room. The kids were still at their grandparents', and the house was quiet, the rain a steady drum against the windows. I planned it carefully, like a general preparing for war. Dinner was Mark's favorite: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans with almonds. I set the table with our good plates, the ones we used for holidays, and poured 2 glasses of Merlot. My hands were steady, but my insides churned like the Puget Sound in a storm. The photos of the notebook's cryptic codes and the video of the basement room were saved on my phone, backed up to a cloud drive Mark couldn't access. I wasn't just ready to confront him, I was ready to end this charade. Mark came home at 6, his construction boots thudding in the mudroom. "Smells amazing, Jen," he said, his voice warm as he hung up his jacket. I smiled, my lips tight, and watched him settle at the table, oblivious to the trap I'd set. We ate in near silence, the clink of forks and the patter of rain the only sounds. He talked about a new job site downtown, something about concrete pours and deadlines, but I barely listened. My eyes kept drifting to his hands, the ones that had built our kids' bunk beds, now hiding secrets that could destroy us. I waited until we'd finished the chicken, until he was sipping his wine, relaxed and unsuspecting. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, opening the gallery app. "Mark," I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest, "what's in the basement?" I slid the phone across the table, the screen showing a photo of the notebook's pages, codes, coordinates, amounts. His fork clattered to the plate, his face going white as if I'd drained the blood from him. Where'd you get that?" he stammered, his eyes darting from the phone to me, wide with panic. "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice low but firm. "I found the room, Mark. The hidden door. The padlock. I've been inside." His mouth opened, then closed, like a fish gasping for air. He reached for the phone, but I pulled it back, swiping to the video. I pressed play, and the screen lit up with the basement room, stacks of cash, burner phones, vials of liquid, the laptop with its damning spreadsheet. His breath hitched, his hands gripping the table's edge. "Who are those people?" I asked, my voice rising despite my effort to stay calm. "Why's my name on that list with $50,000 next to it?" "It's not what you think, Jen," he said, his voice cracking. "It's just storage, stuff from work." I cut him off with a bitter laugh, the sound sharp in the quiet dining room. "Storage? Cash? Burner phones? Vials of God knows what? My name on a spreadsheet?" I leaned forward, my eyes locked on his. "Don't insult me, Mark. What are you doing down there?" His face crumpled, panic giving way to desperation. "It's not like that," he said, reaching for my hand. I yanked it away, my chair scraping against the floor. "Then explain it," I said, my voice shaking now. "Explain why you've got a secret room I didn't know about. Explain why my name is on a list with a price tag." He shook his head, his eyes darting to the phone like it was a bomb. "It's complicated, Jen. It's just business. You wouldn't understand." The words hit like a slap. 15 years, 2 kids, and he thought I wouldn't understand? I stood, my hands trembling as I gripped my phone. "I'm calling the cops," I said, opening the dialer and tapping 911. "Jen, no," he shouted, lunging across the table, his hand grabbing for the phone. I jerked back, the wine glasses wobbling, one tipping over and spilling red across the tablecloth. "Don't do this," he pleaded, his voice raw. "You don't know what you're getting into." But I was already speaking to the operator, my words tumbling out. "I need police at 1427 Maple Lane. My husband's involved in something illegal. There's a hidden room in our basement with cash, phones, and drugs." Mark's face twisted, a mix of fear and anger, and he shouted, "Jen, stop. You're ruining everything." But I held my ground, the operator's calm voice a lifeline as I heard sirens in the distance. Mark sank back into his chair, his hands covering his face. "You don't get it," he muttered, his voice breaking. "I was trying to protect you." "Protect me? From what? The lies? The danger he'd brought into our home?" I didn't respond, my eyes fixed on the window as red and blue lights flashed through the rain. The sirens grew louder, and I felt a strange calm settle over me. I'd spent weeks living in fear, doubting myself, but now the truth was out. Whatever Mark was hiding, whatever he'd dragged me into, the police would sort it out. And I'd make sure he faced every consequence. The sirens were still ringing in my ears as the police stormed into our Seattle home, their boots thudding against the hardwood. I stood frozen in the dining room, my phone still clutched in my hand, the spilled wine staining the tablecloth like blood. Mark sat slumped in his chair, his face buried in his hands, muttering something I couldn't hear over the chaos. The operator's voice had faded, replaced by the sharp commands of officers as they pushed past me toward the basement stairs. "Ma'am, stay here," one said, his voice firm but not unkind. I nodded, my legs trembling, as they disappeared into the dark, their flashlights cutting through the gloom I'd come to fear. They found the hidden room in minutes. I heard the creak of the concrete door, the clatter of metal as they forced open the locked cabinets. "Cash, phones, vials," an officer called up, his voice clipped. "Get the tech team down here for the laptop." My stomach churned, the reality of what I'd uncovered crashing over me. The room I'd stumbled upon, the stacks of cash, burner phones, vials of unknown liquid, and that spreadsheet with my name, wasn't a figment of my paranoia. It was real, and it was tearing my world apart. Mark's head lifted, his eyes meeting mine for a fleeting second, filled with a mix of guilt and desperation. "Jen, I'm sorry," he whispered, but I turned away, unable to look at the man I'd loved for 15 years. The police cuffed him right there in the dining room, the metal clicking shut around his wrists. "Mark Thompson, you're under arrest," an officer said, reading his rights as they led him out into the rain. He didn't resist, didn't speak, just kept his head down, his shoulders hunched. I stood at the window, watching the red and blue lights flash across our quiet suburban street, neighbors peeking through curtains. The man who'd coached our twin soccer team, who'd danced with me at our wedding to an off-key cover of Wonderful Tonight, was a stranger now, his secret life unraveling in front of me. They questioned me for hours, first at the house, then at the station. A detective named Harris, a stocky man with kind eyes, sat me down with a cup of stale coffee. "Tell us everything, Mrs. Thompson," he said, his pen poised over a notepad. I did, every detail, from the hidden door to the padlock, the notebook's cryptic codes, the video I'd taken of the cash and vials, the spreadsheet with my name next to $50,000. I handed over my phone, the photos and video backed up to a cloud drive, and watched his face harden as he scrolled through them. "This is serious," he said, his voice low. "Your evidence is solid. It's going to help." "Help what?" I wanted to ask, but I already knew. Mark was involved in something illegal, something dangerous, and I'd blown it wide open. By dawn, they had answers. The vials were methamphetamine precursors, part of a drug trafficking operation linked to a local ring operating out of the port. The cash, over $200,000, was payment for deliveries. The burner phones connected to encrypted calls with known dealers. The laptop spreadsheet tracked transactions, and my name, they suspected, was a placeholder, maybe a threat or a bargaining chip. "You're not implicated," Harris assured me, his hand on my shoulder. "Your evidence clears you. You did the right thing." But as I sat in that cold interrogation room, my hands wrapped around the coffee cup, I didn't feel relieved. My world was shattered, the man I'd loved for half my life exposed as a criminal. The truth had saved me, but it had also destroyed everything I'd known. I couldn't go back to the house. Not that night, not ever. The police sealed it off, yellow tape crisscrossing the front door like a warning. I called my sister, Claire, from the station, my voice shaking as I told her I needed a place to stay. "Come now," she said, no questions asked. I grabbed my suitcase from the car, the same one I'd packed with clothes and photo albums, and drove to her apartment across town. The kids, Emma and Ethan, were still at their grandparents', and I was grateful for it. How do you tell 12-year-olds their father's a criminal? I didn't have the words yet. Claire's place was small, a one-bedroom with a pull-out couch in the living room, but it felt like a sanctuary. She hugged me tight, her familiar lavender scent grounding me. "You're safe here, Jen," she said, pouring me tea. I nodded, but safety felt like a foreign concept. I'd spent weeks living with a man I didn't know, sleeping next to him while he hid a drug operation in our basement. The betrayal cut deeper than I could process, a wound that bled every time I thought of his smile, his lies, that damn chemical smell clinging to his clothes. The next few days were a blur. I met with Detective Harris again, handing over more details, the receipt from the hardware store, the coordinates in the notebook that pointed to the port. They raided a warehouse there, arresting 3 men tied to the ring. Mark wasn't the mastermind, Harris said, just a cog in the machine, but he'd been in deep, moving product for months. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. Harris shrugged, his face tired. "Money, usually. Or pressure. We're still digging." I didn't push further. The why didn't matter as much as the what. Mark had chosen this, had risked us, our kids, our life. I started therapy the following week, a recommendation from Claire. The therapist, Dr. Linda, was a soft-spoken woman with a knack for asking questions that cracked me open. What do you feel when you think of Mark?" she asked in our first session. I stared at the tissue box on her table, my throat tight. "Anger," I said finally. "And shame. Like I should have known." She nodded, her pen scratching notes. "Betrayal is a thief, Jennifer. It steals trust, but it doesn't have to steal you." I cried then, the first time since the police came, and it felt like a dam breaking. Dr. Linda suggested a support group for betrayed spouses, and I went, hesitant at first. The group met in a community center, a circle of folding chairs filled with women and a few men, their faces etched with the same pain I carried. There was Sarah, whose husband had a secret family, Tom, whose wife ran up gambling debts, and Maria, whose partner hid an addiction. We shared our stories, our anger, our grief, and I found myself speaking about the hidden room, the notebook, the moment I dialed 911. They listened, nodded, offered no judgment. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. I moved in with Claire permanently, or at least until I could figure out next steps. The house was sold within a month, the proceeds split after legal fees. I couldn't bear to walk through it again, to see the basement where Mark's lies had lived. The new owners demolished the hidden room, turning the space into a rec room, erasing the shadow of his secrets. I used my share of the money to rent a small apartment nearby, a fresh start for me and the kids. Emma and Ethan came home, and I sat them down, my heart heavy. "Dad made some bad choices," I said, keeping it vague but honest. They cried, asked questions I couldn't answer, but they hugged me tight, and that was enough for now. I found a job at a local bookstore, a quiet place with creaky floors and the smell of paper. It wasn't much, but it was mine, a steady rhythm of shelving books, helping customers, and sipping coffee on my breaks. I made new friends there, like Lisa, a coworker who invited me to trivia nights, and James, a regular who always had a story about his travels. Their kindness, their normalcy, anchored me. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since college, setting up a small easel in my apartment. My canvases were raw, dark swirls of blue and black, with streaks of red for the anger, gold for the hope I was starting to feel. Mark wrote from jail, a letter I didn't open for weeks. When I did, it was full of apologies, excuses, promises to change. I did it for us, he wrote, claiming he'd been pressured into the ring to pay off a debt. I didn't believe him, not anymore. I burned the letter, the smoke curling into the night sky, and felt lighter. The hidden room was gone, the house was gone, but its shadow had taught me resilience. I wasn't just a wife, a mother, a victim of betrayal. I was Jen, a woman forging a future that was mine alone, built on the strength I'd found in the wreckage.